Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. Well, Peter, there was a very interesting article, for once, in, of all places, the New York Times. The theme of the article was that the French deep state seems to be as thriving and as vigorous as the deep state in the United States. The actual story itself is rather a fascinating one, that a Frenchman, who in the New York Times, a young Frenchman, his name was Malinowski, kind of a Polish name, but a young Frenchman in his 30s, who apparently had worked for Jean-Marie Le Pen, discovered in Smolensk the remains of one of Napoleon Bonaparte's generals, General Etienne Gudan, who had been killed in 1812. His remains had been unknown all this time, and they identified it, first of all, by the fact that he lost his leg, by a cannon shot, destroyed his leg, and so they thought it was a skeleton with, a leg destroyed. And then, of course, they performed DNA tests. So this happened in July 2019. And then, as some of our audience may remember, in August 2019, President Putin visited France and Macron, and they had a pleasant time. And during dinner, the two presidents decided that they would bring back the remains of General Gudan, and he would be given a grand funeral. Putin would be in attendance, Macron would be in attendance, and it would be a symbol of—
Really cool idea.
Very cool idea. Everyone's happy. Everyone loves Bonaparte. Everyone loves history. It sounded like a really good, interesting event. And so everything was agreed upon. And then, so this is July 2019. So this was, and the meeting takes place between the two presidents in August 2019. And boom, the French deep state went into action and said, we don't really like it, this idea. And so the plan had originally been that the French government would provide a kind of a grand flight from Russia with the remains. He would arrive, I don't know, whatever airport, Macron would be there to greet the remains, and suddenly he said, we don't want to do with that. So, but of course, they didn't want to just abandon this because the French are very sensitive to Bonaparte. And so they said to this young man, Malinowski, why don't you just sort of do it yourself? You bring it. Just don't get the French government involved in this. So, Malinowski got some rich Russian, of course, being the New York Times, any rich Russian is always described as a Russian oligarch. So he got this rich Russian to fly the remains to France, but it couldn't be at the request of the French government. It had to be at the request of Gudan's family. Now, Macron was in a dilemma because, he'd avoided the whole embarrassing Russia thing. But now, the French right, French conservatives got whiff of this whole story, and they didn't care for this insult to Bonaparte. It was a very integral part of French history. So Macron said, all right, well, we will bury Gudan. In December the 5th, it'll be the commemoration of Austerlitz. And so far, no invitations had been extended to the Russian government. So that whole big grand event with Putin and Macron gone, and this is just going to be some internal French affair to do with Austerlitz, even though it had nothing to do with his death, had nothing to do with Austerlitz. But what's interesting really about this story is that here was an opportunity to do something that was good for everyone. The French would feel good about themselves. The Russians would feel good about themselves. There would be a great Franco-Russian reconciliation. The two presidents would be there, and we'll put all the past behind us. And instead, we're back to the same old nonsense. All right, Peter.
It was a good article in the New York Times. The only thing that I disliked very much is the hyperlink about confirmed Navalny.
Oh yeah. That and the way they refer to Crimea as Ukrainian territory, which it never was, even in Soviet times or in post-Soviet times, it was never Ukrainian territory. But yeah, go.
Anyway, this is a small thing and a big thing simultaneously. That's what makes it a very interesting story, because it was the Russians that defeated Napoleon. I mean, in one of the great defining moments of the 19th century. That and essentially, when you look at the Congress of Vienna, it's still with us today. Okay, I mean, it was a really grand historical event, and it, because of that, Russia became a very, very prominent concert of Europe. Power broker in European politics. So, you know, that's a huge event. And it's small because, you know, I mean, it is just kind of remembering history. It's a long time ago. Nobody has any gripes about it. Okay. Apparently people do, because they look at very much at the moment. See, reconciliation is such an important thing in history, and it's so underrated because of petty politics today. Look, the Russians and the French can still have a lot of differences, but they can say, but we do have some things in common. And I don't know why the author of the article said, you know, give them a chance to bury the hatchet. I think that's going a bit too far. Okay, but it's a nice metaphor.
Right.
But it shows the pettiness of elements of French politics, and you know, and I'm sure there you know, NATO is sticking its beak in and stuff like this, you know, and for me it's such a missed opportunity. George and I love history, okay, and I love that period of history so much, and it was such a great idea, and it has all gone to waste. And I think that's a real shame, and it diminishes everyone involved, okay. Because it's still a great idea, but it's a missed opportunity.
It's a missed opportunity, and really, Macron shows himself once again to be a very small and petty person. So here he is. You know, he did this grand thing. This is 2019. So this is when he had
stomped his foot, George. Yeah. He stomped his foot and said, "No, I'm going through with it."
That's right. So he goes up. So Putin comes to France in 2019. They have a very cordial meeting, dinner. They discuss this. They say, "This is a really great idea. We'll do this." The original plan was that this big ceremony, this burial, would take place on May the 5th, 2021, the bicentenary of Napoleon's death. Everything's going swimmingly, and then suddenly, the French equivalents of the deep state, all of the Brennans and Clappers and others who are in France, the whole Atlanticist boondoggle, they went in. No, we can't possibly do this. And even though you'd say, but historically, France and Russia have generally been in close alliance. I mean, yeah, they fought in the Napoleonic War, but 2 world wars, they were on the same side. Crimean War, they weren't on the same side. But basically, for now, for about 100 years, they were on the same side. And even during the Cold War, there was the whole goalist foreign policy, which was generally, bucking the whole Anglo-American anti-Soviet thrust.
And what was the language of the court in St. Petersburg? It was French.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and the Russians very much looked to France as a reference, a point of what modernity should be, could be, might be for them. That's a totally different subject, and we can really, that's a big bone to chew on. But the commonalities are right there. And when you sent me that article, after I finished it, you know, here are 2 leaders, Macron and Putin, trying to stress commonalities and looking at a very big picture. Yes, we've been enemies, but we fought on the same side on other occasions. Okay, it's a very complicated, thick, colorful history. Right. But when you see this kind of petty politics intervene, and I feel it living here, Russia is moving further and further away, because you don't go to a party you're not invited to.
Right.
And if you're constantly badgered into saying,
Yes.
what's the point?
Exactly. So that's right. So it was the Russians who came and said, look, we found this, we found the remains of your general. He was he was not just any general. He was one of, Napoleon's favored generals. And this would be a good opportunity. And generally, return of artifacts, reburials, they're always great opportunities for national reconciliation. I mean, historically, that's always been the case. Hey, let's return these artifacts that, that may have been stolen or displaced. And then always an opportunity for, putting aside grievances. So this would have been a great opportunity. And Macron's pettiness shows that, because then he said, hey, I've got an election next year, and people have now heard about this story, and suddenly the right is up in arms about this, that the fact that the French foreign ministry just simply shrugging its shoulders and saying we couldn't care less about this, the remains of the general, and suddenly said, oh yeah, no, let's bring the remains here, but you do it at your own expense, at private expense. We're not going to get government money involved.
Every I was going to say major country, but almost all countries, there is a third rail you don't touch. Okay, you just don't play politics with it. Okay, and they found it. Right. Is this something that people? It's beyond politics. It's beyond so many different things. It's something that it's in their DNA. Right. And a lot of times it's something that's hard to explain. It's just something you feel very strongly about. Right. And right. Here's a bridge. It could have been just ephemeral, a bridge, and that's been taken away. Right. And that's a real pity. That's a real pity, because we can't always agree on every single small element, but we can agree on some big things where everyone looks good.
Right, exactly. It's really, in a way, it's like a no-brainer. You think, wow, if there's one thing that was guaranteed to make me popular, it's this, history, big meeting with another head of state. Everyone feels good. My poll numbers would rise automatically, but he's unable to do so. But then he sort of does this in this surreptitious way, and then says, oh, well, we'll just do it something to do with Austerlitz, the commemoration of Austerlitz. It had nothing to do with Austerlitz, and we won't invite any Russians. Or at least, I mean, maybe they'll invite some diplomatic, from the embassy. But the big event, Putin himself, no, that's gone. So it just shows what a small-minded man Macron is.
But for a great historical figure, this is not addressing, and this is not giving dignity to it. I mean, they didn't actually diminish the history and the legacy of this general. Also, they diminished it by doing this, and particularly by the shift. George, today I was on Red Square. I visited the very, very beautiful GUM department store, which is a real pearl to see in Moscow, and it's so beautiful now. When I moved here 20 years ago, it was a dump, and now it's very, very cool. And as you approach Red Square, on the left-hand side, there is a museum to the Napoleonic Wars. Okay, so serendipity that you sent that article because after I had come back home. And when people go there, we have to remember there's no hatred of France or French people. It's non-existent. As a matter of fact, on another note, there's no hatred of Germans.
No, that's what I was going to say. There's none at all. I mean, and that was something very early on. After World War II, even Stalin, Stalin famously said, the Hitlers come and go, the German nation remains. So he said, we're distinguishing between, the Hitlers and the Nazis and the German nation.
And in this conversation, we refer to a real Hitler, Adolf Hitler, the only Hitler.
Exactly. That's right. So, no, that's absolutely right. Yeah, go.
No, I'm just going to say, the history. The primary role of history is to remember what went wrong, folks, not to remember what makes us feel good. History is so important not to repeat mistakes, okay? And that's why so many people are attracted to it and trying to understand it. And also, history is a healing experience. It can be if you allow it to happen, because I do worry with Europe so indecisive about its role in the world that it's either going to be become irrelevant or just become a permanent colony of the Anglosphere with the United States leading it, which we saw when the airport was evacuated in Kabul. Nobody left the call for NATO like we're leaving. They have to decide, and you made it very, very clear. It's the neighborhood. It's just the way it is, okay? And instead of, we don't recognize, Jen Psaki, we don't recognize North Korea as a nuclear power. You can talk nonsense all you want, but it doesn't change geography.
Right. No, I think so. And I think that, again, culturally, it would also be very important because, where you have, particularly in the Anglo-Saxon world, and this is, again, something we'll probably be discussing at a later stage, that there seems to be some complete lunacy that's going on throughout the Anglo-Saxon world. England, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, something strange is going on. But France and Russia so far have not been polluted by this. So this would have been an opportunity to say, yeah, we live with history. We don't just ignore it. It's a living, organic thing. It's a part of our life. The Napoleonic Wars, it shapes us who we are today. It shapes our relationship with Russia. And so, that therefore would have been an important kind of symbolic moment for Europe to assert, yeah, we aren't going down the path of the United States. We're not tearing down statues. On the contrary, we're putting up statues. We're celebrating the great events in our history. So there was that opportunity, but you can actually also see the fact that there was this outrage within France, and Macron had to address it. Is at least shows that there's a kind of some healthy instincts that we have seen before in France. We talked before about those letters signed by those retired French military. So I think that this would have been a great demonstration to show precisely there is a different Europe and the different French European identity, not the nonsense Borrell, we need a rapid reaction force, not nonsense like that, but that this could be a kind of a third way, culturally and economically and socially and so on.
It just went through my head. Could you see Borrell leading this rapid deployment?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he has everybody has this real tendency to switch languages because his English isn't that great. So he kind of switches into the montage of languages he knows. And it's really kind of a pidgin European language. And no one's really quite sure what he's saying most of the time. But an important point before we end on this one here. You mentioned the reaction of the political right in France and how this has hit a nerve here. But in Russia, the reaction is these people aren't serious. Right. They're not serious people.
Right.
And they don't take their history very seriously.
Right.
In Russia, even though the Western influence does hit young people, still at the end of the day, in comparison, they still have a sense of who they are, and they understand their suffering, and their history makes them stronger. History can do that, okay? And we see that the French don't want to take that opportunity, or at least elements of the deep state, as you point out.
Right.
I don't know. Being a historian dyed in the wool, I love this story, and it makes me really sad at the same time.
No, I agree. I think this was it was such a golden opportunity, because as you read the articles, like this sounds good. Yeah, go on. What's gonna?
We knew it was gonna be a sad end,
and then boom, no.
You knew it. It was the New York Times.
Exactly.
They're going to pop your balloon at the very end.
Yeah, commemoration of the bicentenary of Napoleon's death. Putin, Macron, big event. And opportunity for everyone. To read their histories of the Napoleonic Wars and so on. Boom. And then that's it. We're back to the same old Navalny, Crimea. Russian oligarchs, and nothing changes.
Well, kudos to the author. I mean, of all places of that to show up with the usual the factual inaccuracies that we've come to expect from the Gray Lady. But nonetheless, it was a story that I'm glad they ran, because it was
Yes.
worth learning about. All right, everybody, we're on Locals, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. This coming Friday, which is we're enshrining as a weekly tradition, we'll do another a super chat on YouTube, as long as YouTube allows us to do it. We'll be sending out notifications for that. And I repeat, this is it's a weekly thing. It's etched in stone. Okay, we want you to come and watch and ask questions.
Okay.
Also, we do Zoom chats with gagglers, so get in contact with us on our page. George is turning into a pro at live streaming.
Yes.
And I think this week we should set aside some time for a Q&A. It's both look at questions that are accumulating. We do have the Gaggle store up, so please go there.
Yes.
And the tip jar. I always leave it to you.
And also
I got to pick up the slack. The tip jar.
Tip jar. And people throw us lots of questions. We love hearing these questions. We love thinking about them. People always make great ideas, great suggestions. So we love hearing from you. So feel free to throw us any question. No matter how trivial, like, what do we like to eat for breakfast or whatever, but, feel free to ask us. Yes.
A day in the life of little Buddy. I can tell you about that. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So the tip jar, we rely on the generosity of our fellow gagglers. We're very grateful for all that, your support, your kindness, and we look forward to doing many more of these. So remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. Bye, buddy.